Hello everybody, welcome to this SmartCom Summit 2020. And when I mention 2020, I do realize we're only halfway through this year, but can you remember January of 2020? What has changed since January? I think it's safe to say our lives, our business, our world changed dramatically. And I also think it's safe to say that we're pretty sure that offices and work will never be the same. Transportation will never be the same. Healthcare, entertainment and dating, healthcare, all these things will change. And every single time I use the word never the same, I also realize that's a business opportunity. That's a challenge. That's something we can take advantage of. And it's not only these developments in our society, but it's also technology as the big accelerator in this rapid change, this revolution. There's only one big risk. Peter Drucker, the famous management guru, once said, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it's to act with yesterday's logic. And I think Peter Drucker was right. Let me take you briefly through the program for this show. We'll talk about a number of subjects: broadband, smart everything, work anywhere, cloud and APIs, and CPaaS, which is communication platform as a service. Those are the subjects we will talk about with a number of guests. But first I want to introduce to you the guy who's really the big guy behind this whole program, Rob Curver. Truly a revolution, right, what we're talking about here. It's more than turbulence.
Thanks, Charles. Yes, I think it's more than turbulence. It's really a transformation. I mean, we're living the biggest experiment ever, basically, right? A couple months ago, the whole world started to lock down, and we all decided to go home and to continue our lives as the best way we could, using digital technology, digital infrastructure, and in many parts of the world that worked remarkably well. And in many parts of the world it doesn't. And even the parts where it's going well, there's still a lot of challenges. Because what we're sort of doing right now is we're copying the office and the world that we knew onto a digital pane. And that's of course not where we want to end up. Speaking with Drucker, the big question now is not how do we copy the old world into a digital world, but how do we take it to the next level? Where are we going to go? And I think that's very exciting for especially the people that we have here today who are in this industry. It's very exciting to be part of that. It also gives us a lot of responsibilities as an industry and a lot of opportunities and a lot of, well, basically interesting things, interesting times.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to switch to Mark Winter, who's joining us from New York City. Hello, Mark, can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you.
Hey there, good to have you on the show. What's your perspective on this, I would say, heavy turbulence and probably a revolution we'll talk about even 10 years from now?
Yeah, well, I think that is the right way to think about it. We have defined a series of 5 stages on the road to recovery for enterprises and organizations, how to move from this crisis stage that we're kind of a little bit past now, but we have several stages to go through. And the key question for enterprises, CEOs, is do they follow the same course as previous recessions, which was basically a cost-cutting course, or do they find ways to leverage technology and flatten the curve, meaning not drop so far down as a result of the crisis, but use technology, build business resiliency, and flatten that curve and create a future enterprise that is anti-seismic in the sense it's more agile, more adaptable, and will not be as badly affected by crises like the one we're living through now. So that's the key challenge. And then just to put another perspective on it, the joke we make is, who is driving digital transformation in your organization? Is it the CEO? Is it the CTO? Or is it COVID-19?
What do you think? What do you think, Mark? Who's going to drive that change?
Our thinking right now is that COVID-19 is definitely accelerating digital initiatives. Clearly, there are some pauses as companies think about their costs and their procurements, but we see a lot of cases where we're doing in a 30 days what had been planned for a 2 or 3 year initiative.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'll switch to Patrick. Patrick, can you hear us?
I can hear you great.
Hey there, you're joining us from Washington, D.C., right?
Yes, I'm in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Yep.
And I just quoted Peter Drucker, he said, take advantage of this turbulence, take advantage of this revolution or crisis or whatever you want to call it. Do you agree with Peter Drucker?
Absolutely. I think this is a really, as Mark just said, a kind of an unprecedented situation. We're seeing transformation happening much more quickly than ever before. And I think a lot of the investments that the telecom carriers have done in the past are really starting to pay off. Move to virtualized software and cloud-centric kind of services. That really left us pretty well equipped to be able to quickly adapt and have people work from home and be able to really work from anywhere, which I think is really what's going to be happening going forward. I don't imagine, when we talk about the new normal, that we're ever going to be working in the same kind of way that we've had in the past.
Yeah. And what would you say? I mean, everybody's talking about this new normal. Will it eventually, in your view, be a better normal with all the crisis we have and people going through a lot of misery? You have to acknowledge that, of course. But eventually, we'll pass this crisis. Will that be a better normal, you think?
From my perspective, it's different. I don't know that I would call it better or worse, right? It's just not going to be the same the way it had been before. One of the terms that we use all the time is now social distancing. But just the conversation we're having right now via video, we were having a conversation before here. I haven't seen Mark Winter in a long time, lives in New York. I'm in Washington, D.C. But social distancing doesn't mean emotional distancing. And I think the technologies that we've got here with video and collaboration tools proliferating throughout the world have really allowed us to continue to work and to be productive and to maintain relationships. So I think it's different. I will tell you, most of my colleagues are still looking to the time where we can get back on airplanes again and have face-to-face meetings. But it's very uncertain in terms of when that could happen, if ever, in the same way.
Yeah, I'll switch to the people here in the studio. Edwin, you're with iBasis. What does iBasis do?
In short, iBasis is one of the largest wholesale companies in the world, independent, providing voice services, mobile services, IoT, but also emerging cloud communications, the new phenomenon.
Okay. And in days of Corona, what's your biggest challenge right now, and also your biggest opportunity?
The biggest challenge, what we saw immediately, is that flying almost stopped immediately. And flying impacted directly the roaming traffic. The roaming traffic is impacting your top line revenue. And that is happening worldwide. And that is a significant decline for everybody. At the same time, you see a tremendous increase in data bandwidth, in data communication, in alternative use. You see even now laggards using new technologies. Many people didn't ever use Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatsoever, and they are addicted.
These are household names now.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And Susie, you're in HR. Look at it from the HR perspective. We're going to talk about people working from home, etc. But what is the biggest impact on employees and employers in your view?
Yeah. So it's really two things. One, leaders and leadership has to change, because how we led in the past is not the way we're going to have to lead in the future going forward. And two, I think from an employee perspective, I think that there's a lot of fear and angst and anxiety. So what is the role of the corporation to actually reach out and help people still continue to have that sense of purpose and belonging and engagement in companies?
How hard is that for employers?
I think we're getting there. I think it's just a matter of we have to lean in.
There's also this rapid change where things go faster than you could imagine.
You have to lean in. And my experience is leaders are doing a really good job.
Yeah. And employees are getting used to it?
I think at the beginning there was a lot more trepidation. I think employees are also feeling fear of losing their roles, losing their jobs, and change.
And Michiel, from your perspective, what would you say is the biggest opportunity in these days of turbulence?
Currently, you see that digital infrastructure, the digital economy is thriving. It's accelerated by the crisis. The fact that people work from home, learn from home, and entertain themselves from home, has accelerated the whole movement and has given opportunity to companies, but also to the government to deal with the challenges and to deal with the future economy in the future society, how to shape that and how to create a new reality from a government and a public perspective.
And business-wise, I asked Mark, will this new normally eventually be a better normal? What about your business?
Absolutely. We see digitalization is seen as key to future prosperity. Digitized nations such as the Netherlands and other countries who have a head start with the digitalizations have a far more glamorous future. And I think for companies it's now at this stage a possibility to act on that and to define their strategies.
Okay. As I said before, we'll talk about a number of subjects. Let's focus or let's zoom in. Let's zoom in, right?
Yeah.
On broadband.
So, with digital infrastructure, so important, the question is it good enough? How did we even manage in this crisis, right? Did it work? Did everything work everywhere? Will it be good enough when we go back to work and people start Netflixing again? How is it going to go? And what are the projections for the future? And what needs to be done to make sure that we keep access to this digital infrastructure that we all need?
And we have an opinion poll on every subject. We ask the people, wherever you are, to give you your opinion about an important question on this specific subject, right?
Yeah, exactly. And for this particular subject, we chose a very easy question. Is it necessary for digital infrastructure to be regulated or even managed or invested in by governments? Or do we leave it to the market?
You can say, no way, government regulation, regulated only or owned and managed by the government.
Maybe the government should invest.
May I have your votes, please?
Yeah, exactly. You can vote online.
And we have an analyst talking about this subject, Tim Paulus, please. Tim.
Yes, hi. Well, I think we can agree that digital infrastructure is enabling all these wonderful things that we do today. And along with, device manufacturers, also an important enabler, and let's say apps with all the content, the media behind them. Those are the enablers. But I don't think we need to worry about this because the crisis has shown that, as some people will say, every day is Sunday today. Every day is Sunday. We're seeing peak traffic levels that we used to see only on Sundays when people were watching live sports, doing Netflix, and we see it every day. So there's no real reason to worry because networks are coping. And I think that's also something that you see over the past few years where operators have been used to staying ahead of demand. And if you look at numbers, download speeds and availability of networks, again, they are coping. They're coping very well in creating the next technology for the future and staying ahead of demand and making sure that networks don't crash and stay up. And who would have thought in the early days of fiber to the home, let's say, as sort of the ultimate technology, that cable networks would be coping after so many years, and they do. In the Netherlands, 50% of households are on cable networks, and they're satisfied about it. There's no problem here. So even cable networks, if I may put it like that, are able to cope.
Yeah, thank you. I want to switch to Patrick. Patrick, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. What would be, if you think about broadband and 5G coming up, what would be, in your view, the biggest business opportunity in the next couple of years, given all the developments we see around us here?
Well, I agree 100% that the carriers have done a really good job in terms of coping with the spike in demand right now. But I fear that they can't be complacent in terms of assuming that the infrastructure they have now is sufficient for future demand. If anything, we see this working from home and working from anywhere kind of phenomenon really driving incredible amounts of bandwidth requirements. As we start looking at making sure that applications are available from the cloud and the cloud be accessed everywhere. There's a tremendous opportunity for carriers to be investing right now in low latency services, which requiring a much greater bandwidth in terms of mid-haul and backhaul than they've got in their network. When we've got 5G, when 5G is truly available, I think we're really going to see different services that we never even envisioned before. I was on a panel on Internet of Things not too long ago, and they were talking about farming in Latin America. And one of the things that they talked about is if they have 5G available, then they're really able to have these smart devices on farming equipment to make sure that they're monitoring the effectiveness of the fertilizer that they're putting into the ground, the seeds that they're actually planting to make sure they get the optimal yield. So I think we're going to see the requirements for information real-time, accessible on a 5G network for applications that we've not even thought of right now.
Yeah. What about you, Edwin? I mean, working in telecom and 5G and more broadband, I mean, that's paradise for companies like yours, right?
It is paradise. At the same time, you need to realize that let's say, if you see the development of these services, it's different everywhere. In Europe, we have a luxury situation because
great infrastructure.
We have a great infrastructure, we have the money, we have the capacities, and I think everything is aligned. Look at Roam Like Home. It was not an initiative from a national operator, it was the EU who stepped in. Let's say, so there is a big opportunity. On the other hand, also look at countries like, for instance, America, where accessibility of even 3, 4 or 5G, still the majority lives on 2G. Mm-hmm. So the chain is as strong as the weakest spot in that chain. So we talk about the luxury situation as you sit over here, but it is not accessible for everybody.
You seem to agree, Patrick?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, I think that there's still a fair amount of infrastructure that needs to get developed. Now, the advantage is it's somewhat flexible in terms of being able to add capacity because, again, most of the critical infrastructure is really software-based, has been virtualized, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to invest in it. It doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of parts of like, for example, as Edwin mentioned, part of the country here that really doesn't have broadband coverage at all.
What do you think, Michael? Where would the investment have to come from? I mean, you're talking about either government, public money, or a private money, or a combination of both. Where do you see the money coming from?
Well, from a public perspective, there's two things that really need to change, that we need to act on to safeguard our future. First of all, we need to change the definition of what digital infrastructure really is. That used to be a synonym for telecoms. So we focus on 5G, on the mobile networks, and all the rest that was behind it was sort of automatically taken care of by those companies. That's no longer the case. We need to look at data centers, to look at internet exchange points. We need to look at subsea cable intercontinental. We need to look at infrastructure clouds. Those are all the digital infrastructure, not just for telecom, but for the digital society. And the second one is that we need not just to look at market or government. The question, is it market or is it government? It's going to be both. That means
public-private partnerships.
Absolute PPS. The market needs to do its job, but the government has to take away all the inhibitors and the things that the market can no longer do on its own strength.
Is the market ready for this change, Tim?
I wouldn't worry at all. I
Okay.
mean, as I said earlier, there's just no question about it. There's one thing about 5G that you might worry about, but other than that, if you talk about data traffic increasing by 40% every year, it's no problem. And operators know this, they don't need the government, at least not in, let's say, the Free West. And sometimes the market fails, as they put it, okay, and then the government steps in Germany, in the States also, where they provide some grants for small operators to provide rural coverage, okay, but leave that alone. The one challenge I think there is exactly what our speaker from the States just said, is that we don't always know what 5G is going to do. And if we do, we don't see a business case sometimes. Now, in those cases, operators will be reluctant to invest in their networks, and that's a problem.
Like,
for example, you have the whole internet. It really works because of intercontinental connections, subsea cables. And in the old days, subsea cable investments were done by the telcos. That's no longer the case. It's now Facebook and Google who invest in those types of.
that's quite a change.
That's absolutely a change. So that's a game which is no longer accessible for the smaller players, and that's where governments need to step in. to prevent that we become completely dependent on the big players, that we keep some of our digital sovereignty, and that investments also by the smaller networks are still possible. So I see these public-private partnerships as key to that to the future and to the open character of the internet and the future of standards.
So how do you look at the function of telcos in this whole transition in the next couple of years? I mean, it's changing, that's for sure. But what's left for the telcos?
The basic telcos, they need to focus either on capacity expansion, bandwidth expansion, and focus upon that. I think for KPN it's clear, it's 5G, it's fiber. But that creates a big opportunity for, let's say, the new businesses as such, where they cannot spend a lot of efforts and money on that. At KPN in the past, they could do that, but they can't do it now. So you see parties like Enable You, Rapid API, all these parties are stepping into a segment to fill in a gap which is essential, which has been accelerated due to COVID. Had the app to see where we are, who is healthy, yeah, how quickly was that developed? In the Netherlands, it's still not there. In Singapore, it's there.
How do you see the business develop when it comes to the role of telcos and private companies in the Big Five, Patrick?
Well, I tell you, I think the telcos really have a big influence in terms of really what's going to be happening going forward. The one thing that I think that they can bring to the table is an understanding of security, because that is something that's absolutely paramount of importance as we start having more cloud-based apps, having a lot of different points of contact where bad actors can intrude into the network. So that's one place where I really look to, again, we've been talking about investment in terms of what's going to be happening with broadband infrastructure. I think security with the ransomware attacks, with the kind of Zoom bombing that you've seen and at the edge of the network, I think carriers are uniquely qualified to start plugging those holes.
Yeah, and let's talk about business opportunities. Let me start with you, Patrick, and I make a little round around the table here. If you had to put some spare money in a certain application or company, what would you recommend going forward to the next couple of years?
Well, I'm very high on our last topic today, CPaaS, right? I think that there's just a tremendous opportunity of different kind of applications that can support a lot of different kind of market verticals. And carriers are uniquely qualified to help get into that space, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that later.
Give me one example.
Telemedicine. I think it's a tremendous opportunity right now in terms of being able to really be able to talk to subject matter experts around the world to solve problems without having to travel.
Yeah, and your money goes to Edwin?
Look at one of the other examples. I think if you look at Microsoft Teams and the explosion of Microsoft Teams during COVID, it was fantastic. However, still people looking at the dial path. Where's the dial path? I don't see the dial path. Telegelity stepped into that gap and developed the dial path possibility. I think that's just a simple old and new technique together with, let's say, the old telecom infrastructure, and you connect two things to each other.
So you're talking about the combination of the traditional telco, bandwidth, broadband, with these services on top. Which is similar to what you said. Digital infrastructure is more than just a network layer.
Global connectivity is key.
Right.
Without global connectivity, you don't have the accessibility to all those features. So that remains.
Yeah. Where goes your money?
You shouldn't really ask me too much in technology. To give you an example, Jitse Groen, who is now the richest guy in the Netherlands, he was a trainee in my company.
So, oh, really?
Oh, really? You trained him well.
And I missed blockchain.
Well, if you give us advice, we don't have to follow it, or just say, if you advise this, we don't do it. But which direction would you think?
I would definitely see communication services. Communication will really thrive, will really grow. E-commerce will continue to grow, and supporting services for e-commerce will be supported. So cloud hosting, software as a service are all areas that will continue to expand over the coming decade.
Yeah. What about you, Tim? Give us a golden tip.
Well, one is easy. Let me first put it like this. If you have to make the choice between networks and services, I would say the choice for services is complicated because it's a jungle and it's completely exploded. All the innovation is happening over the top, mainly in the States, but nobody can really predict what's going to stick and what's not. services, networks, great business, right? You put €1 into the ground today, you sell it for 2 tomorrow. But the one tip, of course, is, I mean, that's something, well, where I'm coming from, that we used to say to each other, and it's been true for every year since, is buy Amazon shares. It's as simple as that. Amazon is always the best investment. I mean, I've been following this from the point the share price was at $10. That's at $10 20 years ago. There's in the order of 2,000 now, and you know it's an amazing company.
You should be on a beach somewhere, right?
It's
Just lay on your back.
I am.
Do you have time to look at the results of the poll? I'm curious what happened.
If I can bring that up.
Or you don't have it on your little screen?
Yeah, I should have it here.
Somewhere.
I'll try.
Okay, later.
And have some questions as well. But Amazon, you say?
Always.
Still, I mean, because I mean
yes.
they've gone up tremendously, of course.
Yes, but same picture last year, same picture 10 years ago, and everybody would say, you know, it's too late, but it's never too late.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see how I can bring up the poll. I'm not sure. Yeah, here it is. Okay. Yeah, I got it. Our digital infrastructure should be regulated or managed by national governments. What do you think? 30% said no way. 47% only regulated and 12% owned and managed by the government. So most people say only regulated. Is that fair?
Okay. I think that's a safe in the middle, but...
Safe in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't address your issue about the cross-Atlantic cables, right? I mean, so we leave that to Facebook
that we need
and
to collectively resolve. So partial investments is probably what's right, but government owned, I doubt whether that. But anyway, I disagree with that 12%. Absolutely.
Okay. This event is called SmartCom, smart communication, but it's not just communication that gets smarter; it's smart everything.
Yeah, so smart everything. So I've been hearing about smart cities for at least 20 years. I know there's been activities, I don't know. Some people say Amsterdam is a smart city. Some people don't know what's smart about Amsterdam at all. I know some smart shops. So the question really is, what do we mean with smart everything, right? But it seems to be clear that in this age of social distancing, we need more support. We need something to happen in our surroundings. There's stuff happening with voice assistants and Alexa and all these things. So there's stuff happening. Again, the same question, certainly for cities. Do we leave that to the market players? Do we need governments or work together? And we also have a little poll here. While we talk, you can give us your opinion when you're watching this, whether in the post-corona age, smart homes, smart offices, smart cities will be more important than our privacy.
And you can say yes or no. You cannot say I have no opinion. Right? Is that right?
Just yes or no.
Okay.
Everybody needs to have an opinion today.
Okay.
It's
and
smart.
I have a new guest, Sebastian Hoogstad. You work for Poly. What's Poly doing?
Thank you. So Poly is a manufacturer of hardware.
Okay.
We manufacture UC endpoints for communication, and that allows seamless and easy communication depending on the platform.
And you're doing great, I guess.
Absolutely.
I was at MediaMarkt last week to buy a webcam.
Gone. Yeah,
Gone.
and that's not even the market that we're in. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah.
That's great. About this question about the role of government, how do you look at the role of government, Sebastian?
I think it's facilitating. So
Okay.
I think they should facilitate a path the way, but it's not their role to determine where the market is going.
Okay, it's not a public utility.
Correct.
Okay, and one more, a new guest, Jan Hodig, Comscope. What does Comscope do?
Comscope is producing the equipment that creates the infrastructure for telecom and IT, very often used for smart homes as an enabler, smart buildings, smart society.
And you're zooming about booming?
Yeah, well, you see some parts of the market less growth, but certainly on the home side, you know, it's booming. Yes,
What are you talking about? The webcam stuff?
Yeah, but the infrastructure, you know, we have a challenge in making the infrastructure important, critical. And, you know, there's a Dutch soccer player, Johan Cruyff, who said every disadvantage has its advantage. Well, this is certainly so for the infrastructure. It's of critical importance, very much so in the home.
Yeah. And what about a little more long term? I mean, you have a positive outlook on the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, definitely. I think this situation now proves that communication is critical to all of us, wherever you are, wherever you live, wherever you work, wherever you see in venues, soccer games or whatever. The infrastructure needs to be of the highest quality, and that will continue to grow.
Yeah. Susie, where do you look at, when it comes to the role of government or private enterprise or a combination of both? And the difference of opinion, of course. I mean, here in Europe, we may think different about it than, you guys in the US.
Yeah. So we focus mostly on Latin America, outside of Latin America, and absolutely I would agree it's a regulatory, but absolutely not a utility. I think that has a lot to do with the integrity of the leadership of the country. So as you look at the European countries, you don't think diabolically, but communications is so important as a national platform that under the wrong hands, it could quickly go.
Well, you have some issues there. I'm sorry.
You know what I'm talking about. It could go the wrong way.
Yeah, don't go there. Yeah. But, I mean, are you optimistic about, the question whether these regimes, these governments, these political leaders in Latin America particularly, I mean, taking up the challenge and do what they have to do?
I mean, I think during COVID, there has been some pressure, right, on actually saying people don't have to pay, and so it's a huge pressure on the business around it, and there's a huge investment going in. But so far, so good, right? So far, so good.
Yeah. And Patrick, where do you see the opportunities when it comes to smart everything?
Mark.
I'm sorry, yeah, Mark.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I mixed it up.
Sure. Well, connected everything, we call it IoT, Internet of Things. I mean, there's just many use cases. IDC counts over 100 use cases. You mentioned smart home there, telemedicine, connected cars, fleet management, food traceability, on and on. We have seen, clearly the pandemic has forced a pause in IoT deployments as companies think about their cost basis and what is going to have the immediate return as they need to optimize their business for this environment. So we see uneven developments by industries. Traditionally, it's been manufacturing, transportation, utilities that have been early adopters, but clearly transportation has slowed way down with the pandemic. Manufacturing also has slowed down as the factories have shuttered. On the other hand, we've seen an uplift in government, public sector, healthcare, retail as well, where you think about curbside pickup, delivery, contactless purchasing, etc. So the use of connected devices and IoT has become pretty interesting there. And then finally, one of the newer developments we're seeing, and I think this is going to pull the whole space forward, is the augmentation of connected devices with AI, adding intelligence into the edge where those AI connected devices are, right? It's a distributed network. They're all around the edges. Putting AI there, closer to that edge, to empower automated decision-making in real time to decide how to treat different pieces of data. I think everybody would agree it's critical to capture information, to share it, to consume it. But the challenge is, how do you do that effectively? And the only answer to that is using machines and AI, because it can't be done manually.
Susie? No?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're right. You agree with him?
Yeah, I was just shaking my head. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the name of the game is enriching the data that was mentioned by the previous speaker.
Add value.
Add value and make sure that wherever you are in a smart environment, that is enriching your life. So add value to the data, combine data, don't continue working in silos, combine all that, and then enrich your life.
But when you talk about innovation, a lot of people are scared to death because they say, the big five, the frightful five, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, and Google will basically gobble up all these new small companies, and we end up with a monopolized market. What do you think? Is that a fair assessment?
Well, it's definitely a risk. I mean, there's no way denying that there is a risk, and there's a very big economy in scale in what we're doing today with technology. I mean, yeah, it pays off to be very big.
And wouldn't be smart.
Yeah, exactly. and I think it will also allow them to have these massive communication and calculation facilities in the cloud to become even more efficient based on the system learning itself. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, let's put it that way. And there I do think, in all fairness and honesty, that there's government that needs to monitor that at least and take action when things are going the wrong way. I don't think we need monopolies. I think we need an open market to have choice. So
Mark, how frightful are the frightful five?
Yeah, I agree. I think that they could be very frightful. I mean, they've done huge amounts of benefits for us. But I think that platform model, which those big five have perfected, is a self-reinforcing model, which is why it's so successful, why these companies are worth so much money. But I think there has to be some caution to it. And I think one of the impacts of the pandemic has been that people have forgotten about some of those reluctance, or some of those hesitancies about what the power of these platforms means, in favor of all the great capabilities that are coming out from all the collaboration tool sets, and that, the fact the internet didn't break and we could get to our applications. People have kind of forgotten some of those concerns of privacy and control. And I think that's a big risk.
Yeah, and we'll eventually, as a young creative, we all know creative destruction, right? And we've seen a lot of huge companies, the IBMs and American Steels of the past, and they I wouldn't say disappear, but they it didn't go very well with them eventually. Will creative destruction eventually take care of the frightful five?
No, I don't think so. I think
This time is different?
Yeah, it's different. We're talking to an awful lot of customers, whether it's enterprise data centers or cities, and they insist of making use of the local companies, to help them with the challenges that they have. So it could be that the big five will provide them with a basic infrastructure. Yeah. It's something like an iceberg, the basic infrastructure provided maybe by the big five, but the top, and that's very important element of the total solution, will be provided by the local players.
Yeah. We have some questions from people in the audience, wherever you are. Jacqueline Leenhouts asks, you see a big variety in IoT solutions. How do you see all these solutions come together, and which role do you think the big telcos should take? Asked Jacqueline. Anybody? Rob?
I could.
Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, the obvious first one is connectivity, right? And that's what they're all doing. The challenge there is that's connectivity not like they're used to, right? When you think of the ARPU, the cost per month, or the spend per month per endpoint, it's tiny on a lot of IoT. It could be 50 cents. So that's not like what you and I would pay for a smartphone connection at all, or a broadband connection. So that's a challenge. So they got to move up stack and add more value, and that's where they're scrambling around trying to figure out what kind of value. What we talked about, analytics on that data, packaging that data, turning that data into an asset. That's the direction that I think the telcos can go in. But I think they're also being very cautious. Somebody mentioned earlier, they have to be careful of their cost. They can only do things that scale massively, and an awful lot of the IoT use cases don't scale.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I think the trick is you need the combination, right? You need the infrastructure, you need assets, you need IoT, you need devices, you need bandwidth, and then you need at some point you need creativity, and that's telcos and creativity don't necessarily match well. So you need to, for the last mile, if you will, the application development. I think you need local players that know the local landscape, the local needs and regulations, etc. So you need to go to a much more complicated ecosystem.
Yeah. Let me go to the poll question. Before we go to the results, I would like to put the same question to you guys. The question was, In the post-corona age, smart homes, offices and cities are more important than our privacy. Is it more important? What would you say, Susie?
Absolutely not. I
Absolutely not. Okay.
Privacy is, I think, absolutely key.
Key. Even if it slows down technological...
I think you can do both.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's an if or that. I mean, given where we are today, I think you got to lean in, and I think you can do both. I don't think it's binary at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fully agree. It's not one or the other, it's a combination of the two.
You have to be smart about it.
Yes.
You can.
And we can, yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Who said that?
What? Yeah, you said it, right? Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's a sliding scale if we're not careful. It's things we're getting used to. I mean, everybody's walking around with a smartphone, which means that people know stuff about you that you probably don't even know they know about you. Yeah. That's the kind of thing people need to be more aware before you can actually do something about this. So I believe it's a sliding scale. But to your point earlier, I think yes, it can be done both, definitely.
Mark, what about you? Privacy, or just give it up, or we can do both, like they said here.
I think we have to do both, but I think it's a very, very hard calculation to figure out how we do that. I think every now and then we see some big surprise that people, oh, I didn't know that information was being collected about me, and then we have to shut something down. We've seen that several times with some of the carriers. The over-the-top players, Facebook, Google, they seem to get a pass. Carriers don't. Right? Now, carriers do charge you money, and Google doesn't charge you anything to do a search. But what they are doing is monetizing your eyeballs, your presence there. So they have a responsibility to manage this. I just think we've got a long way to go to figure it out.
I think they're starting to learn, though. I think they're starting to take the privacy issue more serious lately. If you look at the latest COVID-19 APIs that Apple and Google developed, they are the ones that regulate the usage of the APIs. So it's only used for medical purposes, blah, 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 and not for any state wish, basically. So it's kind of interesting to see that the big five.
And it's interesting to see what happens now to Facebook. That's not so much about privacy, but more about political stuff, of course. But the big companies saying to Facebook, you have to change.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to not only adapt, but change radically. That's writing on the wall, isn't it, Susie?
Absolutely. Yeah, and they hit them where it counts. They pull the advertising. They hit them right where they're
left and right. Coca-Cola, everybody, big companies.
Yeah.
Starbucks, everybody.
Yep. You have Audi. You have a lot of companies that are going in, just going. You have got to change. I think they went to Congress. Congress hasn't done. The governments haven't done enough to do it. So corporations are stepping in, and they're going. If you don't change, we're just going to pull it.
Finally, Mark, you agree? I mean, these companies have to change because companies, public opinion will make them change.
I think the big stick are companies, are enterprises, because they're spending the money. If they don't spend their money, we've seen what Facebook stock has lost $60 billion in a couple of days.
Mark Zuckerberg lost a couple of billion. Yeah,
Poor guy.
Yeah. That works. Right.
enough left. Yeah. So
that's clearly more that's more clout than government has over them.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, we were talking about smart everything. One of the things that gets smarter and smarter and changes drastically is the way you and I work. Work anywhere. Yes, we can work anywhere. I mean, we have some people from overseas joining us, and they probably... You're working from home, Mark? He doesn't hear me.
I am,
Okay.
and I have been for almost 4 months now.
Do you enjoy it?
I actually do. I'm getting very used to it.
Okay, wonderful.
I'm not sure I'm going back to the office.
Okay. And we have a poll question again. And I still try to get the results from the previous one. Our question about work anywhere: how many days per week do you expect to work in the office next year? How many days do you expect to work in the office next year? That's the poll question. You can put in your votes on. I'll try to get my the results of the previous ones. I have some new guests here. Stijn, how do you look at work anyway? I mean, everybody knows, I mean, yes, we work from home, but what's the implication in the longer run for companies, for employees, for society? What do you see?
Yeah, I think that the psychological impact of working from home is, we're still in a very early stage, but I think people are finding already it takes a lot more energy to work remotely than to meet someone in person. And I think the tools that we are using are rapidly evolving, but it's just the first steps we are taking now. So I think it has a big impact, but we will not see it until we are a few more months into it. We're just scratching the surface at the moment.
And what's the role of your company in this whole field?
So yeah, we'll bring the European champion to bring the businesses together to make them work remotely better with our tools, basically.
And they do work together?
They do work together, yes.
Because they're private companies. I mean, they compete, right?
They do, but at the same time, in our, if we look at how we work together, for instance, in our group, we see that everything had to change. We have 900 people. From one day to the next, everybody was working remotely, but I'm very proud of the people and the employees and how flexible we are. And we are an IT company, but you also see traditional companies in all over Europe that all of a sudden had to make the switch. And I think it's impressive. It's interesting that all of a sudden all of this is possible. And yes, it's a huge experiment, but it's exciting. It's going to change the way we work together, and I think it's changing it for the better eventually. If we don't close our eyes to also some of the negative sides of it.
Yeah, and also new guest Florian Overkamp. You work at Speak Up. What does Speak Up do?
So basically, what we do is reinvent all kinds of telecommunications in order to bridge the gaps between different solutions like fixed and mobile telephony, but also IT in the company.
And the whole Corona crisis, economic collapse, impacted your company tremendously, I guess.
Well, the biggest change, I guess, was that we had to work from home all of a sudden, and that's a paradigm shift. In those first weeks, I definitely noticed, also because of the kids are at home, your personal time and your work time are getting intertwined very much. And that's one of the big shifts. So I think that one of the things, in addition to the video solutions that we see rising right now, we also need other collaboration tools.
Yeah, and you're doing well business-wise, I guess.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about it.
Well,
it's not a commercial, but
no, exactly. So to put it briefly, basically, we're able to help our partners, and we are able to help our clients. One of the things that we do see is people are obviously very hesitant to change to new solutions unless they're drastically forced to. So, like was mentioned before, who is directing your IT strategy? Well, COVID, obviously. People do try to stay back from changes that are not necessary, but we're able to help.
Yeah. Okay, Mark, what's your analysis of this whole, work anywhere concept?
Yeah, it's the question is, what is it going to look like going forward, right? That's obviously through the crisis, we saw many heroic efforts, 48 hours shift the workforce to remote, and it could be thousands, tens of thousands of workers, and it worked. People did it. Now, what does it mean? Some of the findings we've seen so far: work at home does not mean replicating what you do in the office or your bricks and mortar place, whatever that place is. It requires re-engineering the whole value chain of how you think about what is work. What are the parts? Technical, clearly, and I think that's probably what we jumped on first, providing the tools to those workers to be able to collaborate, stay in touch, Teams, video, Zoom, Slack, whatever. And then the technical aspects, the network connectivity, the VPNs, the access to cloud applications. So a lot of technical aspects, not to be minimized, but generally they've been there. It's a question of scaling them. There's also an economic factor here that organizations are beginning to think about. What is the cost of a work-at-home employee versus an employee in brick and mortar office? It's less work at home. Real estate is very expensive. Also think about travel costs. Yeah. You take travel expenses out. You can load up those work at home employees with cameras, laptops, printers, everything you want. You're still at a fraction of what your travel costs would be. But then finally, there's a people aspect to this. And I think somebody mentioned this earlier. How do you do this now? How do you hire? How do you coach and train people?
Yeah.
Privacy issues for those working home. So there's a lot of things we still have to figure out. The important thing is it's not just replicating what we did in the office.
Yeah. And I have another guest before we go to a little video clip. Remco de Kramer with Microsoft. Tell us a little bit about your Teams product. I mean, that must be through the roof.
Yeah, there have been interesting times, definitely. Yeah. So we went from a situation where Teams was a cool product, which was new. Everybody knew it was the future of smart communications. And then all of a sudden,
it was not a household name.
It was
right?
not a household name. No, definitely not. But then all of a sudden, it became mission critical to keep your business running. So COVID definitely accelerated us into the future. And when we look at our statistics, we saw in the Netherlands an increase of 14 times in the amount of active users in 4 days.
4
in
days.
The first 4 days of the lockdown.
And can you handle it?
We had a couple of small bumps, but I believe everybody understood that because you don't size for these kind of things. Most importantly is that it were only small bumps and we could handle it.
Okay,
and
wonderful.
It's running well.
Yep. But imagine buying or building a new office shortly before the whole corona epidemic hit. Mm-hmm. That happened to one company.
A brand new office building. I wonder whether there are any people in there. VoiceWorks are the provider for remote working. I wonder how they see the future.
How do you look at this building, the usage of this building after what happened in March?
I think the purpose of the building will change because we are all very satisfied with working at home or working remote. But I think that the contact between people and colleagues is very important for getting energized, getting new ideas. So we need to see what the purpose of the building will be in the future to contribute to a very productive working environment as a total to an employee.
And what would you see being the purpose?
The purpose of the building should be that you have a place to go when you decide what you want to do in that specific place. So if you want to brainstorm, we all experience now that's difficult to do online or to do all the time online. This period has many advantages of working at home, so we stick to that. But we create a new working environment based on the employee, based on the people, and we see what place the home base or the remote base will have and what base this building will have in that world.
Which developments actually do you envisage for the future?
When I look at the products and services we make, I think also the collaboration tools will accelerate in development. So we will add more features and we will speed up the introduction of new products and services. In January we thought the phase we're in today would be in 3, 4, 5 years. And we accelerated and that part of the future is here today.
Hey, Mark, talking about, working from home and thinking about offices and square footage. I mean, think about Washington, D.C. or New York City. I mean, the impact must be, huge and dramatic for those folks who invested heavily in offices, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think, the new word we hear now is de-densify, right? If you're going to go back to the office, it's not going to be laid out like they've been. You have to have much bigger distances between people. You have to alternate the people who are in the office because you can't have them all there at once. Also, my office is in Midtown Manhattan on the 26th floor. I'm not sure I want to share an elevator. Can I have a system where I can reserve the elevator as I get off the subway and enter my building so I can have my own elevator? So there's a lot of considerations like this that people are working through. Again, it won't be like it was before, even when we do begin to open up and go back in the office. And as you know, in the U.S., some places are now, after opening, they are now closing again. So, it's a very volatile situation.
Yeah. And Remco, what about Microsoft here? You have a big facility here in Holland as well, big offices. How do you deal with this 1.5 meter thing, or just people stay home?
Yeah, so far our office is still closed and will reopen soon. But when we reopen, we're in a new hybrid reality where we have fewer people working from the office and a lot of people working from home. And that sets challenges to your meeting culture. And one thing that is very important is that your meetings are inclusive. Nobody must be left behind and everybody must have an equal voice at the table. So that means that people participating from remotely must have an equal voice to the people participating at the actual table.
And you do that by making sure you enable your office your rooms for video-based meetings, like with Microsoft Teams.
Yeah. But Florian, how do you? I mean, working from home is great, but you also need creativity. You have to motivate each other.
Absolutely.
I mean, the water cooler talk, it's not useless. It's something that's part of office culture. How do you deal with motivation? How do you deal with creativity, which is so necessary in this
exactly.
sector?
So that's a major problem, and I think that scheduling more video meetings is part of the solution, but it's not the only one. We've been seeing large uptakes in, for instance, chat, so that people can do the work when they want to, when it suits them, which matches much more their personal situation. And you also need to embed room for that kind of serendipity talk in those kinds of environments as well.
Yeah. I hope that is what we will use our offices for. That we'll use it for creative meetings.
Exactly, and it's a meeting place, obviously. Yes.
Yeah.
And
then the bulk of work, you get that done from home.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, so I think we heard a lot of things here around also using different applications. Everybody's developing in making this new unified collaboration application ready and available for more creativity. I think when I look at the developments of the last couple of weeks, interestingly enough, the headsets obviously exploded from a business point of view. I mean, nobody can buy a headset at the moment anymore. It's improving now, but that has been an issue for a long period of time. But the video investments done by companies over the last couple of weeks have been pretty stable, which was surprising to me because I would have expected that to slow down because of office closure. But people were preparing, to what was said earlier at this table, to preparing those offices for communication use in the new situation, and that is something that we see continue to happen.
Yeah. And Rob, I have Rob on the screen now. I mean, he works remotely, not very remote, right, Rob? What about you guys? I mean, in your company, I visited you last week, and you guys were just, working from the office.
Yeah. I switched to work from the office more than I did before. I've always worked from home, or Starbucks, or client offices, or airplanes. So for me, this last couple of months was different in the sense that I was working more from the office, at proper distancing, etc. Of course. But that had to do with the work environment. I mean, at home, it's just too crowded with the kids, home education, everything. So I went to the office to find more quiet and to organize a better working situation, basically. I think that's a big thing as we go forward. We need to work on those, let's say, home settings, equipment, as well as in the office, by the way. Conference rooms, I think, right now are getting changed into video conference rooms because of the way this work thing is changing completely.
Yeah. Let me ask you, because we asked the question to people in the audience, how many days per week do you expect to work in the office next year? What about you?
Probably maybe 1 day a week.
1 day a week in the office?
Yeah.
Okay.
3.5.
3.5. Mark, what do you think? Despite the elevator?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe 1 day as well.
Okay.
I would like to be in the office, actually, but...
You like working in the office? I mean, to meet people and, social part of it?
Yeah, it's better. Yeah, for me, it's better.
Okay. Oh.
I've been in sales all my life, so it's a day max a week.
Okay, maybe because you're traveling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Rob, what do you think next year?
Well, I hope to go back to traveling. I missed that part as well, the traveling, because it's kind of weird. So I hope to go back to maybe 1 day at my own office and a couple days a week on the road again.
Okay.
That part I really miss. I mean, I miss the interaction, the social part, the conferences. I mean, it's great at what we're doing here, but it's still a little bit different from a traditional conference where you get to.
What about you, Remco?
Well, for me, 3 days at the office, but I have 2 young kids running around. They're very excited that their dad is working from home.
Okay. And what about a company like Microsoft? And I mean, it's valid for a lot of companies. How do you keep young employees motivated? Because some of these kids have never known the old world of going to the office 5 days a week from 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think you keep them motivated by giving them the tools that they know and they're familiar with to empower them to work in the way that they're used to work. Don't force them to work in a certain way. Give them the liberty to work the way they want. I think that's critical to keep them motivated.
Yeah. Let me look at the results of our poll. Nobody says I will not work from home. The most votes go to 2 days or 3 days a week. How many days do you? It's about 2 or 3 days actually in the office. That's 39 and 33%. There are not that many people who say, I'll work 5 or 6 days. That's the most people do 2 or 3 days. So a little bit average. So you're more or less in the. Oh, you would work less. Your expectation. You said 1, 2. Yeah. Okay. Will the old world ever come back?
No.
Nope.
I hope not.
Will the old world ever come back, Mark?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, it's a change, and it's not going to. It may even out a little bit, but it's going to change forever, basically. That's what you're saying?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's tough time to be in the office real estate business.
Okay. Yeah. But we got advice to invest in Amazon and not in offices, right? Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about technology, not so much about work and that kind of stuff, but let's talk about cloud and APIs. All right, cloud and APIs. Rob, take it away.
Okay, so one of the big successes, I think, of this last couple of months was cloud, right? So we were able to do a lot from home because we had our applications running in the cloud. And we talked earlier about over the top. That's basically everything cloud. It's running everywhere. Innovation also deployed or enabled by APIs. We touched on that as well. It's important to make combinations, and it helps if applications are running in the cloud and can be combined with APIs, etc. And now, the interesting question, of course, is when you mesh basically applications like that by combining bits and pieces from everybody that are running everywhere, a phone system from one company and maybe an office suite from another company and maybe some specific components from other companies again. It's great for your innovation and you can build more bespoke applications quickly. But now, of course, the question becomes who controls it? What about governance? Who's responsible if things don't work? Where do you turn to? So the poll question that we have is related to that. Who's going to build in this new era of agility and innovation? Who's going to build these applications? Is that going to be the big five or the 5 for 5, as you like to call them, Charles? Is it going to be specialized integrators, value-add resellers, maybe telcos? Or is it basically going to be every one of us? Are we going to make it so simple to put these bits and pieces together that everybody will be building their own application in the future? That's the poll for this segment.
Yeah. Okay, and we have a new guest, Raul. Can you hear me, Raul?
Yes, sir.
Where are you calling from, sir?
I'm outside of Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay, Raul Castanon. I mean, talk a little bit about cloud and APIs. What are we talking about? What's the significance for business?
Sure, thank you. So I think I'll probably just repeat some of the trends that Mark and the other panelists have been talking about. It's very interesting for me to see the impact of the coronavirus on how we work. And I think, like others have mentioned, we're actually seeing an acceleration of trends that were already building up. And a lot of these trends are under that big umbrella of cloud and APIs. The one thing that I could add to what's already been said is that this is a different way of managing business. It's a different model. So Rob was just bringing up the point, who will be building this new world? I think that system integrators, channel partners, technology companies, telecoms, they all have a role to play in this new world. And we will see a migration to this business and technology model that is facilitated by the cloud and APIs.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'll switch to Frank briefly. He mentioned APIs, and I mentioned it as well. Just for the folks who have no clue what they're talking about, what is an API?
Yeah. Well, API, literally, it's an application programming interface, but that's a technical term. So that's like the plug into applications to access data or functionality that is in it. Well, it can be anything. Like, okay, if you cadastre, which holds the information for
the public information about
all real
property
estate
and stuff
in the Netherlands. Yes. So they have this information, and of course there's an application for people to access that information, but it's also like this secret plug into it, where you can, from another application, just retrieve that information directly. If you say, okay, I want to know the owner of this property on this location, for example. These kind of things, and you see that everywhere.
You disclose information, because I remember,
yes.
You couldn't look up stuff. You had to go to a building and pay a couple of guilders back then, and then you got the information you need. And now it's just digital.
And then, of course, you've got Google, but that can find words or things that are already on a website. But everything that is enclosed into applications needs to be released, needs to be opened up, so to say, through APIs. And the interesting thing about APIs is that they are no longer just a technical plug, but they are like, the access point of the business value of a lot of organizations. I think Stijn is an example where your company says, okay, we've got functionality that is actually aggregated from different companies, but you expose the business value that you provide to your customers through this API. Yeah. So then you have B2B value chains that plug into each other through these APIs.
I mean, you work a lot with APIs, Stijn, right?
Well, I was talking about Spain specifically as an example. We have a business there that is more than 70% of the revenue does not come through the user interfaces that we've built there, but they come through other applications user interfaces, so Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, and our system is used in the background, but it's integrated through APIs into their system. So for us, we get a lot of money from the customer or a reasonable amount of money from the customer for delivering value, but it's going first through other people's systems, and that's only possible with an open API ecosystem.
Yeah. Give me one example of a business model you really like that's totally dependent on APIs.
Oh, wow. Okay, so basically these last few weeks, how many times does it happen that your phone starts ringing while you're in a Zoom call or a WebEx or whatever? What would be ideal is that if the network, in a general sense, understands in what kind of a state I am and whether or not to disturb me with a call, for instance. That would be something that adds value if you can do it broad enough.
Sounds like an app.
Absolutely. Well, yes and no. Yeah.
What's your favorite example?
My favorite example is Uber, and I get to use this because I know one of the public affairs guys from Uber. It shows the tremendous innovation power of cloud. We tend to forget. We think of cloud as renting somebody else's computer, but Forbes said 10 years ago, cloud is going to be the biggest disruption ever. And if you look at Uber, simply how it works, you can change the world literally from behind your screen, sitting in your basement.
With existing technology,
existing
by
technology,
combining
have an API, have maps, have communication services, have a payment gateway interface, have a marketplace interface to phones. You blend it
same with Airbnb, right?
Airbnb, you blend it and you can disrupt the world, and create something new that sets existing business upside down.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting and exciting that anybody will be able to do this. It's not big corporations that can come up with a new kind of business proposition or a new service. It's anybody that can click together.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. But of course, there's also, there's a lot of tricky points because these APIs, they are very promising, but to actually make them work together, it's tricky. Because the information, how it comes out there, doesn't fit in there. And then you have the security, because these are vulnerable.
It's like different plugs in your, whatever.
Absolutely, but these are also very interesting points for hackers to access the same functionality and data that is so valuable. Is also valuable, of course, for hackers. And where in the past maybe, okay, I'm going to steal somebody's username and password. Well, now they will go directly into all the information if they manage to hack these APIs.
Hey Raoul, give us one brilliant business model nobody thought of when it comes to use of APIs.
I was going to say Uber, but somebody already used that one.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Sorry for that.
I could just add quickly to that, that what I have found very useful in that example is how it brings together the demand side and the supply side in real time. And I think that's the model that everyone will start emulating. For that matter, the company behind that huge success with Uber, which is Twilio, they were early innovators in terms of bringing the platform model and APIs to telecommunications. And if you look closely at how they do everything, the entire business is based on this platform model. So that would be my favorite example.
Yeah, okay. Let me look at one example of a company that uses API's in a very smart way. A Dutch company, Boels.
Ik kan het natuurlijk niet laten. Ik ben hier vandaag bij Boels en ik heb een gesprek met Robert van de telecomafdeling. En hij heeft een heel mooi verhaal volgens mij over hun smart communications en wat zij de afgelopen tijd daarmee gedaan hebben en de voordelen daarvan.
4 jaar geleden hebben we eigenlijk besloten om van een decentrale oplossing een centrale oplossing te maken binnen ons telefonieplatform. Ons grootste probleem was de verschillende providers in Europese landen. En daar was bij One Central één groot Europees platform de uitkomst voor centralisatie.
Over hoeveel vestigingen hebben we het?
Wij spreken in principe over 19 landen en we hebben momenteel 800 vestigingen binnen Europa.
Een paar maanden geleden is COVID. Wat gebeurt er dan?
Het eerste wat wij gedaan hebben is natuurlijk alle mensen die thuis konden werken 100% thuis te laten werken. En toen kwam het op een gegeven moment, wat gaan wij doen met onze vestigingen? Wij hadden te maken met verschillende regelgevingen in diverse landen. In Nederland hadden we een intelligente lockdown, daar hebben we niet veel gemerkt van COVID. Maar in België bijvoorbeeld een totale lockdown. Daar gingen vestigingen, moesten gewoon dicht. Dus toen moesten we iets gaan doen met de bereikbaarheid terwijl de vestigingen dicht waren.
En hoe hebben jullie dat gedaan?
Wij hebben dat in principe geregeld door heel eenvoudig, boven onze telefooncentrale zit een schil. Dat is zeg maar het platform van One Central. En daar konden we redelijk, met een paar drukken op de knop, konden wij eigenlijk de hele callflow konden wij sturen op die plekken waar we dat graag zouden willen hebben.
Dus met 1 druk op de knop was eigenlijk alles geregeld?
Wat betreft de inkomende gesprekken was het zo simpel.
This is a great example, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's very useful.
Yeah, very quick innovation, very quick way of changing ways by very simple means that are readily available in which you can create some new applications and new usage types. I think that's the future of innovation. It's called permissionless innovation. You can start today, you can easily step up.
And you don't have to be big, you don't have to be,
Absolutely
you can just
and
do it.
Even for companies with no strong IT background, such as Boels, it lowers the threshold. You can pull out your credit card. You can start with very little investment. You can start to innovate.
We're talking about small innovative companies. This is a question from Harm Overgoor. And he says, are the speakers not afraid that once a software application developer grows big, it will be swallowed up by one of the big 5, killing the potential of more competition? That's a fair question, right?
Absolutely. That's definitely a risk I see, and it's something that's more general, right? I mean, we see all of these the big 4, 5, whatever you want to call them. They definitely have an incentive to buy these types of solutions, and I think that new solutions will arise. I mean, APIs democratize these kinds of developments, and that's where the value is.
You have to look at innovation as a conveyor belt.
Yeah.
At the end of the conveyor belt, big ones will scoop up companies that grow. But on the other end of the conveyor belt, new startups and new initiatives keep appearing because the innovation is so easy to do. You can always start. So I'm not afraid of that.
Finally, for your role, how big is the risk that these big guys are, basically eating up these small innovative companies and maybe stifling innovation?
I think it's something that we see all the time, and it is something that I could be worried about. I do think I have seen in my line of work many startups with really creative ideas and get swallowed by large companies, and then they kind of fizzle out. So I do think that question brings up a really good and valid point. On the other hand, you also see a lot of the innovation coming from these startups. So I think that's something that will continue. It's not going to end, but there's always that risk that they will be swallowed and stifle innovation.
It sounds like there's some API going on. It demolishes buildings on your end. It's
working from home. That's one of the challenges. Yeah.
Yeah. I won't go there. Thank you so much. I have one final question real quick for you, Frank. Hans Tochtema, is it expected that an all-encompassing software package like WeChat in China will make APIs less relevant? That's a good question.
No, I think that, well, something like WeChat relies on APIs. So it plugs in all kinds of new functionalities through APIs. So it doesn't make them less relevant. It actually enables these kind of things.
Okay. Final subject. We go to what's called CPaaS, which is Communication Platform as a Service. Rob is back from his remote location. Was it a long trip?
It was not very long, and I wanted to be here for CPaaS because it's my favorite subject.
CPaaS is your favorite subject.
It
Tell
is.
us all about it.
So CPaaS is Communication Platform as a Service. It's the communication building blocks that are made available through APIs.
Is that new?
I like to think of it as contextual communications.
You're out of breath.
I know. You don't know where I was. 2 blocks down the road. So it's contextual communications, and really the trick is that you can build communications into any application, like Uber. The app from Uber has SMS and voice built in, makes it easy.
So what's the CPaaS part of Uber or Airbnb or Instagram or whatever? What's the CPaaS part of it?
So the trick is what you want to do when you have the app. At some point you want to say, okay, I picked whatever I want to do. Something's not working. I want to call somebody. You don't want to go back to your phone, dial a number. It has to be integral part of the application to make it easy to use. And that part, the communication part, is really what CPaaS is about.
Okay.
So it's the communication building block that you can use in your own application.
Anybody here uses CPaaS and said that's great? Yeah?
I just mentioned in a previous session, I think one example is Microsoft Teams, including direct calling. If you look at multi-line applications where people want to have a conversation and on the other side the call center wants, can you show me by video your ticket, and you don't want to switch your device, but what you use, you make a picture of, let's say, or you open the video and directly on top of the line there will be a video connection established and you can exchange that data. So there are multiple, let's say, features already in practice doable at this moment, and that will enable, and it is not the traditional telecommunications anymore, it's more the underlying components facilitating API developments going forward. What we are doing is, let's say, developing a marketplace whereby together with Enable You and Rapid API, we connect marketplaces and enable MNOs and operators to go to the market quickly without doing all those heavily investments by themselves. So, and that gives the time to market will be significantly quicker for the enterprise community or the whatever users they want to focus upon.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think telcos have become kind of like a commodity providers. I mean, at the time of Mr. Bell, it was an exciting thing, telecommunication and telephones. But it has become, okay, provide, something that everybody knows already, and you compete maybe on price, maybe a little bit on stability. But once you can make it really a building block of all kinds of new developments and just embed it totally into it, it becomes very useful in a lot of new places. So I think that, but of course, these kind of old telcos probably cannot move the fastest and do this. Well, first of all, it's a thought jump, but then it's also a technology jump.
Yeah.
But by really taking what you already have, chop it up in smaller pieces, and then expose it to APIs, it becomes super, super useful. And also you can actually probably charge more for it.
Now, the example Uber was mentioned multiple times. In the beginning, the Uber app was also presenting the phone number of the taxi driver. Uber wanted to kill that. That switched to local DRDs, local access numbers. And that is legacy for an incumbent since decades. So what you see now is that those legacy, let's say, infrastructural telecommunications will enable APIs to act local, to keep the call local, to keep the video local. And that is what you do. You use the building blocks of the existing telecom infrastructure in combination with, let's say, marketplace developments. You need volume, and you can't have a marketplace for only 1 or 2 APIs. That doesn't fly off.
Let me switch to Raoul. Take us through your vision when it comes to the business perspectives of CPaaS. What's your favorite application?
Well, should I go back to Uber? I think it's just
I was looking for new investment opportunities here.
Yes, certainly. So CPaaS is a space that I, as an analyst, have been looking at for more than 5 years. And it's very interesting right now that it is at the pivotal point. The reason for this, with the pandemic, a lot of organizations they're being forced to accelerate their digital transformation initiatives. So if you think back at the beginning of the crisis, a lot of companies were scrambling to maintain business continuity, hence the need to provide tools working from home, but also tools to continue that engagement with clients. So I think this trend, what we might have expected to happen in a period of maybe 2 years, it's now compressed in just a few months. We actually have a CPaaS market forecast that we had to adjust with different scenarios. We looked at it from different angles. Our expectation is that with this digitalization of the customer experience, it's actually going to be an even bigger opportunity. It will have a contraction in the near term, but longer term, CPaaS will probably explode. So it's a very big opportunity.
Okay, and I'll switch to Patrick in a second, but I want to watch a little video clip of a Dutch company. We talk about working remotely, but this company is called Beter Dichtbij, which means better close by. That's another
Now imagine, I
perspective.
need to go and see a doctor. What do? I have to make an appointment, I have to call them up. Or I could physically maybe not even go there. What are the possibilities? I'm having a discussion, an interview with Sander Bijl from Beter Dichtbij, in English, Better Close. They build a smart communication platform to ensure that me as a patient, I can actually get in touch with my doctor 24/7. Can you give us an insight of your dreams?
The dream at Beter Dichtbij is to make healthcare easier. Easier for the patients, easier for the GPs, easier for the doctors.
32 hospitals actually use the platform.
Some hospitals are using it in every way they can, and in some hospitals a few doctors are just starting.
And when you say usage, what is it you actually use?
The doctors use our platform to provide patients with messaging functionality, and they use it to video chat with patients if needed for consultation. It is a communications platform, and yes, it's about chat and about video chat now, but the general underlying idea is that using digital tools will increase the power of the relationship between the doctor and the patient.
You're intensifying the relationship almost.
We do, because people have their doctor in their pocket.
What is important for you in a partner? You have various partners that you use.
We built our video chat system based on the Ribbon communication platform. It has to be proven, stable, security, privacy, etc. But mainly it has to have a track record. We don't want to add something to the platform which is shiny and new but never been tested. There were days we had 90 hours of video chat on one day. So we have to have scalable, proven partners under our platform.
And we have again a little poll for you guys at home or wherever you are, which is about secure communication. The question is, what sectors need secure communication building blocks most? You can choose healthcare, government, logistics, commerce, finance, education, wine tasting. Well, whatever. Pick whatever you want. Patrick, you're still with us, right?
Yes, I am.
Terrific, wonderful. What about CPaaS? What's your perspective on it? I mean, is it so promising as some other people here in the studio mentioned?
It is. It's an important part of the overall Ribbon portfolio. And let me describe a little bit how we actually got into this business. So Ribbon is really a combination of a lot of companies coming together, invested very heavily in real-time communications. The big pieces being Nortel Communications, Voice Services, GenBand, Sonos Networks, Edgewater Networks. So we've looked at all of the intellectual property, about 400 patents in real-time communications. We decompose those into those communications APIs we were talking about the last panel for voice, video, chat, text, to make it more easily available for contextual communications, as Rod had mentioned. Now, what we've done is really made that platform available to carriers, right? If you think about the companies that I mentioned and really what our heritage is really building and supporting infrastructure builds for these large carriers around the world. So what we wanted to do is not compete with the carriers, but actually enable them to provide CPaaS services to be able to compete like with companies like Twilio was mentioned earlier. So, when we talk about kind of the vision that Ribbon has to be in this space is we want to create lots of Twilios. We don't want to compete with Twilios. We want those carriers to have the ability to do that. And one of the example that you just showed here is really with our partner KPN, where they've got an API marketplace and they're using our voice and video APIs. So they're consuming those little pieces of communication, building it into the application. The other example, probably one of the largest carriers in the world, is AT&T. And that's a kind of a different approach where they came to us and said, look, we want to white label your entire CPaaS communication service because they're, quote, tired of having value sucked out of their network by the likes of Twilio and other people. So there is a unique place for carriers to be able to get into this space and really leverage the heritage they've got in terms of quality of service, trusted relationship with really large enterprises. And AT&T's even taking it a step further. They're looking at all of the 1-800 number customers that they've got. I think it's the toll-free services. And they're saying, how can they provide a better level of service rather than just, providing a number that people can call for free? As Rod mentioned, right, it's really important for us to be able to have a richer experience, right? So what they've done is taken what we call live support, what they call their AT&T API marketplace click to connect, and allow you to be able to reach into a call center with a WebRTC, with a front end from the web, so that if I'm doing a search on a e-marketplace and I'm having a hard time finding something, that search, when I can actually have an AI, one of the speakers talked earlier about artificial intelligence, the AI device, the chatbot can actually say, are you happy with what you found? If not, promote that to talk to an agent who's got the full contextual communications available to them.
Wonderful. Susie, where do you see applications for CPaaS?
Wow. So if I look at the broader world in the developing countries, I think it's endless the opportunity. I mean, if you just look at the example that we just had, I'm going to say this badly, dichtbij.
Very good.
Imagine where you have the remote villages where people have no access at all.
Yeah.
Sure.
To be able to actually provide medical assistance remotely, I think, and there's millions of people that still need to be connected. So I think that the opportunity is huge.
Well, actually, we did this little poll and said what sectors need serious secure communications building blocks most. On top, medicine. I mean, 26% other people mentioned government, logistics, commerce, but medicine is way on top.
Yep.
That's not surprising, right?
Not at all. I mean, well, first it's life, then it's economy, I would say. And basically...
And people think probably about, the corona crisis as well. I mean, if we can do new applications in order to fight this terrible virus.
I think Beter Dichtbij saw a 25-fold increase of their 25-fold increase in 2 weeks' time, because all of a sudden all these doctors had no choice but to go remote or on video, and patients like it. But you need a crisis like Corona, apparently, to reset some of these systems, right? And now we have the opportunity to keep it anew after a reset. I think that's a challenging part.
And specifically in the U.S., where you have insurance companies declining pre-existing conditions. Yeah. So it's no surprise that medicine is
that's a huge issue.
Huge issue.
Yeah. What's your favorite application?
My favorite application. I'm a big Uber fan, but also look at Park Mobile. If you, who's having the coin still for that?
But it's already there. I mean, we have
it
Park
is
Mobile
already
and
there.
Similar applications, right?
Yeah, I like the example I heard earlier that we need a Park Mobile Plus that sort of spots when the police comes to check and quickly signs up for the parking. I think that's the next
puts
phase.
in the digital money. I mean, I was already here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether that's legal. But I don't know.
It's always interesting to make things smarter, I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just also awareness of where I am. Do I have to park here, or do I have to pay here, or do I have a permit? And then automate these things because the information is somewhere.
But I think the key is that we need creativity from, let's say, the Zoomers. Who can think of these new things? So when we as the traditional companies, industries, provide the building blocks, that's the whole CPaaS philosophy, right? And API philosophy. You provide the building blocks, and then you make sure they're secure, and there's some sort of checks and balances, and then you can let creative startups do their thing.
And there's a question from Tobias Petersen. He says, does a regular SIM card with a number become unnecessary with everything in the cloud and with API? I don't know. Anybody?
Edwin,
yes.
ASIM?
If you look at IoT technology, then indeed you can embed everything in the software right now and that identify where you are, whatever you do, and whatever functionality you need. So yes, in the end, a SIM and a number is old-fashioned already.
It's an identity, but the identity could come from anywhere.
So in the introduction of this program, I said, we're only halfway through 2020, right? And so much has already changed. Everything becomes flexible and fluid. Imagine being back here with Rob and you guys late December. What's going to be the main topic?
I think there will be an acceleration of things which are, let's say, ready to decide. And I think parties will invest quicker now in the new business, in the new features. People will realize that COVID was a pandemic, but at the same time an accelerator of decisions going forward.
It was an interruption in a way.
It was
and
an
accelerator.
And an accelerator at the same time.
Yeah. In a way, it's a change catalyst, right? It gave us a big reset, and you know how sometimes you need a reset, right? You need a sabbatical to think clearly again. In a way, with all the terrible consequences of Corona, of course, I think in a couple of years' time we're going to look at this year as a turning point, because we get to really reinvent some of these issues. And if a couple of years from now we have telehealth in a much better way, so it's more affordable and more reliable and better, I think we're going to be grateful that we finally made those big leaps.
Before we come to a wrap up, I mean, we have a little thank you for all the people and companies, particularly, who supported this event, this webinar. We have that slide? Not yet. Oh, we don't see it here in the studio. And finally, a little round around the table. I mean, I just asked, what's going to be the theme 6 months from now? What do you think, Susie?
So we've coined this words war on talent. I think as you see all the companies like leaning in, trying to accelerate the digital agenda, and combined with the fact you can work from anywhere, I think how companies hire, it's going to require people to really rethink that. Because if I don't have to move to Holland to actually work for a company in Holland, we're going to have to rethink the whole entire way we hire, and I think that the companies that get the best talent around this are going to be the companies that are going to win in the end.
Because our daughter is 26 years old, lives in San Francisco, works for Airbnb, and she said, a lot of people laid off, but particularly, the engineers were just scooped up by other companies.
Absolutely.
I mean, come work for us,
Absolutely.
come over here, we need you.
You got to have the future vision.
Yeah. What do you think? Looking forward?
I think the topic Susie mentioning is I think crucial. I think we hardly incorporated the millennial approach, and now we already have a new generation coming in with new ideas, much faster than we. I consider myself as a laggard. I'm working for an entrepreneurial company, but the thoughts of the young generation is essential to make this big step forward. And how do you connect what we can enable, how we can make it happen, and how can we use their ideas? I think that is extremely important the upcoming 3, 4, 5 months.
Yeah. And what about you, Patrick?
I tell you, one thing I thought this whole pandemic has really shown is that people really can be effective working from remotely, working from home. But I think in the next 6 months, we need to step back and look and say, really, how well did things work? And are we really protecting the assets that we've got, the information that's flowing over the top for the most part? I think security is going to be very important. You guys, we talked about privacy earlier on. So let's say that there is some kind of regulation that kind of imposes different privacy regulations. How do you enforce those, right? So I think there's analytics play here as well as security.
Okay, wonderful. Raoul, what about you? Looking forward?
I think that 6 months from now we will be finally able to get a glimpse of what the new normal is, what it means in terms of working remotely or working in the office, what it means in terms of digital interactions. Healthcare has been coming up. I think that that's a perfect example. And we will also have a better idea of how security requirements will be evolving. To your question just a few minutes ago, I could have answered all of the above. I think security is important for all of these industries. But of course, healthcare and other regulated industries, it will be a top priority for them. But that's what I see in 6 months.
Okay, wonderful. Finally, Frank?
Well, I'm a natural optimist, but I think in 6 months from now, we are in wave 2, deep down, because 94% didn't have it yet. So actually, there will be a second wave of lockdown that will be probably a little bit more severe than what we had so far, at least in the Netherlands. That's what I think, unfortunately. But purely from a technology perspective, of course, everything that we started now will be even more important. And we have a little bit of experience, so it will accelerate further. And we also probably will discover that APIs don't make sound and are not visible. So although they are super powerful building blocks on SafePass or whatever, it is also crucial that they are findable and that we find a way, like in the App Store, where you find apps, that APIs become visible.
Well, if we go into lockdown again, then of course the wine tasting becomes very important. Again,
That didn't get many votes though.
No,
But you know,
I got my vote. No, I think I'm hoping that 6 months from now, whether there's another lockdown or not, we're going to see this mindset change really stick. So we're going to have a different ecosystem. There's more room for creativity. There's more collaboration in all different ways, and there's an openness to look towards. Let's go back to what Drucker said. I mean, we need a new mindset. We can't work with the old
Don't stick to the
logics.
turbulence. I mean, look past it.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you look at it from that perspective, I mean, you're a little bit on the pessimistic side. We heard a lot of optimistic, predictions about technology and the way we can handle our huge problems and challenges. I think it's fair to say, and first of all, I say thank you to all our guests over here on the other side of the building. Thank you so much for joining us. That was terrific, wonderful. And looking at the future, probably you'd say, you ain't seen nothing yet. Thank you very much. Hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.